This is the most rugged border on Earth. It sits between the two most populous countries, home to 1/3 of the world's population, and the second and fourth largest global economies. Between them lie the massive Himalayas, a landscape of high-altitude deserts and disputed territories that have turned this region into the highest battleground on the planet. Here, the militaries of two nuclear-armed giants face off, yet they often fight not with missiles, but with sticks and clubs. One single shot echoing through these valleys could spark an escalation that spirals out of control. Today, tens of thousands of troops are locked in a constant standoff across 3,500 kilometers of frozen peaks. But this border is only one lens through which to view a relationship that is rapidly reshaping the world order. The modern versions of India and China were born in the late 1940s. Initially, they were neighbors committed to peaceful coexistence. They shared a vision of Asian solidarity, seeking to lead the post-colonial world. This might have been easier if the map had stayed as it was in the early 40s, with the independent region of Tibet acting as a massive buffer. India and China had rarely interacted directly because this roof of the world stood between them. However, as the Communist Party took power in China, they moved to secure Tibet for its strategic high ground. Suddenly, the two giants were nose to nose. When Tibetans rose up to protect their culture, India granted asylum to the Dalai Lama, establishing a government in exile. Beijing saw this as a betrayal, accusing India of colluding with the West to undermine Chinese sovereignty. By 1962, the friendship had dissolved into a brutal mountain war. India suffered a humiliating defeat, and the victory left China in control of vast disputed territories. Since then, the boundary issue has been the core of their competition. The lines remain messy, particularly in the high-altitude glaciers of Kashmir. Over decades, both sides have tried to manage the dispute, but neither is close to solving it. Because both are now nuclear powers, the risk of escalation is existential. In the 1990s, they agreed not to use guns or explosives near the border, leading to the bizarre reality of soldiers clashing with stones and iron rods. While the mountains remain cold, the economies have been heating up. For years, trade was seen as the answer to peace. Today, China is India's largest trading partner in goods. India relies on China for electronics, machinery, and pharmaceuticals, while China imports Indian minerals and chemicals. But there is a massive catch: the trade is heavily lopsided. Nearly 80% of this trade is in China's favor, creating a deep economic vulnerability for India. In international relations, there is a theory that intertwined economies don't fight. But when trust is low, this becomes weaponized interdependence. When border tensions flared in 2020, India banned hundreds of Chinese apps, including TikTok, citing national security. China responded by restricting exports of fertilizers and rare earth minerals, reminding New Delhi of its leverage. Beyond the mountains, the rivalry has spilled into the Indian Ocean, the lifeblood of India's economy. Over 95% of India's trade and 80% of its oil move through these waters. China, also dependent on these shipping lanes, has expanded its naval reach far from home. While these are commercial projects, India fears they are a string of pearls, a network of dual-purpose bases that could be used for military intelligence or blockades. India is responding by beefing up its own maritime posture, upgrading bases on remote islands, and forging the Quad partnership with the US, Japan, and Australia. This global chessboard is getting more complicated by the day. Historically, India has been non-aligned, refusing to join Western or Eastern blocs. Today, it practices multi-alignment. It still buys the majority of its weapons from Russia and relies on Russian oil, even as it draws closer to the United States to counter China's rise. This puts India in a tricky balancing act. New Delhi needs the US for military technology, but it cannot afford to completely alienate Russia or spark a full-scale trade war with China. The pressure intensified in 2025 with shifts in American policy. New tariffs and visa restrictions from Washington hit India hard, exposing its vulnerabilities. This led to a surprising plot twist. India and China recently took steps to ease border tensions, looking for breathing room. We see images of leaders holding hands and smiling, but underneath the surface, the mistrust remains. India is stuck in a triangle of pressures. It cannot afford to anger China, it cannot displease Russia, and it must keep the US as a strategic partner. As power rearranges on the world stage, the rivalry between these two giants will determine the future of the 21st century. This has been KyneAndCo.